everybody. I am beside myself with excitement today. I've taken 16 years of IELTS teaching, through which I have become quite familiar with all of the examiner evaluation criteria, and I've helped a lot of students get a 7 or higher score on their IELTS exam. If you go on the British Council website and check out how you're getting your IELTS speaking mark, you will find a little bit of vocabulary that may be intimidating. For that reason, I would like to break things down into layman's terms. Layman's terms are words that anyone can understand. So if we look at the 4 ways that you are receiving your mark, we're talking about lexical resources. That is your vocabulary. We're also dealing with grammar, grammatical range, and accuracy. The third one is your fluency. As we talked about in our fluency class, which was video number 1, it is cohesiveness and coherency. So we'll talk a little bit about those things quickly, just so again, you know what to shoot for. You know the things that you need to deliver on if you want to get at least a 7 score in that 15 minutes IELTS speaking exam. Finally, we're talking about your pronunciation. I think I'm going to start with this one because when you look here at pronunciation features, that's pretty general. And what does that mean? When we're talking about the main pronunciation features, we have phonemes. There are 44 different phonemes in the English language. If you're at the level where you're taking an IELTS test, you probably not needing to concern yourself with these. These little stresses are so short. The second stress we're dealing with is the syllable stress. So you can see with any particular word, it's broken down into syllables, and we want to put the stress on the right syllable. The third one is the sentence stress. So if it's a particular word in the sentence, say it's like, what are we having for dinner tonight? Or what are we having for dinner? Again, so you want to have it in the right place so that it sounds natural. So it's like, what's for dinner, right? What's for dinner? You can hear the emphasis, the stress on that word. Now, what is for dinner? With grammar, we're going to try to use the past simple, or otherwise known as simple past. You can use the present perfect, past perfect, or continuous, and just a mix of all of these is great. A variety, as they say, is the spice of life. In terms of grammatical structure with the clauses, we can use like subordinate conjunctions. So we can use these dependent clauses. So if it's raining outside, we'll do this. So that's a subordinate conjunction. Dependent clause that needs to be completed with another clause. With lexical resources, we're basically just looking at your vocabulary, and again, we're going to talk all about collocations and idiomatic expressions as well. And finally, with your fluency, if you check out video 1, we'll talk about this as well, but fluency can be broken down into 2 areas. We have your cohesiveness, which we're gonna make effective through the use of linking phrases, and it also deals with your coherency, so that what you're saying is clear and logical to your listener. So that's our lowdown in terms of the IELTS speaking part 1 criteria. Really important to know. And this will come into play for part 2 and part 3 for speaking. So it's good for us to kind of establish it right off the hop. The lowdown, IELTS speaking part 1. Part 1's mostly about you. It's about self-introduction. You might get questions that are leading away, but you want to kind of include yourself in it more, because part 3 will give you a chance to deal with more social issues and a kind of a larger scope in terms of maybe your country or your culture, things like that. So part 1 is introductory questions. For part 1, 2, and 3, they're all about 5 minutes long. You can see here you're going to get about 3 or 4 topics. Don't worry about body language or eye contact, whatever's natural for you. You don't need to be locking eyes with your examiner. You probably won't see that person ever again. What's most important is you giving strong, clear, logical examples and opinions and reasons, as well as when you're doing those 2 things, examples and reasons, you're using and satisfying all the criteria that we just talked about: the grammar, the fluency, the vocabulary, and of course your pronunciation features. Another thing that people sometimes ask me about is whether they need to do any kind of introduction or conclusion. Absolutely not necessary for short answers. As we talked about in our last video, painting with words, keep it succinct, that is to the point. You can just start with a starter and you can end on your final point, or some reasons, feelings, importance that back up that last point. Once again, in terms of length, short answers are 15 to 30 seconds long. That's it. You're going to have a couple, 2 or 3 sentences. You might just have one major point. It depends on whatever you're comfortable with. People that are more fluent can kind of fit in more points, but I find it's better just to have more details. More details tend to give more meaning. When we're looking at kinds of questions, you can get quite a variety for those 3 or 4 topics, like kinds, likes, dislikes, childhood. You can get W questions as well. When I say W's, I'm talking about the 5 W's of journalism. So it could be like, is the air clean where you live? Are there enough parks where you live? Things like that. So, and again, when I say the 5 W's, it's very important that we don't forget the how. How is often in there, especially frequency. Common questions could be like, how often do you go to the cinema? How often do you exercise? Things like that. How often do you eat healthy foods? Or how often do you eat junk food? You might also get questions about recently, lately. Any of these questions, guys, are fair games, so be prepared. Our lowdown for study tips. We're going to keep it real simple, as I try to do. And we basically want to practice some practical vocabulary and synonyms for very common words. We'll try to get those into your natural speech. The second thing we want to do is play around with collocations, idiomatic expressions, which you can always be learning, and they will definitely make you sound like a world traveler. Definitely like a native English speaker, if that's something you are hoping to do. Finally, we want to satisfy the fluency component that our examiners will be checking by making things cohesive, tying our points together with linking phrases. When we talk about something that's perfect in our minds, we can say an ideal way, a method, an ideal method of exercise, an ideal way for me to get to work. This can, again, apply to a wide variety of common topics, so it really comes into play quite often. We talked about this before with something meaningful, the meaning of something, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of pride, a sense of satisfaction, a sense of self-worth. There are lots of ways that something can give you meaning. Again, in dealing with the significance, we can also say something plays an important role, a significant role, a vital part. And we've covered some of these things before, so I'm not going to linger on them. But these are, again, some very, very practical terms. We have pros and cons, an upside of something, the downside. I also like to use a positive or negative aspect. So a negative aspect of sports is there's always a chance of injury. We're looking at recreation and entertainment. We know these words, but again, do you use them naturally? I tend to think of recreation as outdoor entertainment, so it's physical or active, whereas entertainment's often more like indoor. Excellent. We're rolling into those collocations and idiomatic expressions. So many of them are phrasal verbs, so it's like take a cab, hang out, things like that. Really common, take a flight, catch a ride. If we're surfing, catch a wave. Dude, catch a wave. And you can see a couple examples here. I really enjoy just hanging out with my friends. I enjoy chilling out with my friends, things like that. These are phrasal verbs. Talk about high spirits. always say that to people. Instead of a good mood, in high spirits, in low spirits, we have a happy medium. Kind of finding a balance between two things like work or play, healthy food, junk food. Under the weather is feeling ill. Quality time, one of my favorite words, you'll hear me use it, is because time is so scarce. You know, you got to make the most of it, right? And the little time that we get to enjoy with our family and friends, we call that quality time. We got a lot of these actually. I didn't realize they had so many, so I put in some of my favorites for students out there. Hopefully you can ace the IELTS test and not bomb it. Quite confident you put these into your natural speech, then you're going to get a lot closer to acing it than bombing it. You can really get a score that you feel a sense of pride about. Fair weather friends, those friends that are just there when you're doing well. If we talk about busyness, we could say that we have a full plate. Oh, my plate's full. I really got a lot on my plate. Right, I got a full plate right now, which means I got no free time. So we're also talking about starters and other linking phrases that we can use to get the ball rolling, because we don't just want to answer. We don't want to begin our answer with yes or no. And we want to tie our points together to make our speech more fluent. There are a few different ways, different starters that we can put into motion for successful answers. One's frequency, so you can see how often. These are all here before you every day, regularly, daily, consistently, on a regular basis, on a consistent basis. For the most part, hardly ever, rarely, seldom, once in a blue moon, or it depends. And that's a good one. You'll see that later in a model answer. It depends on my mood. You know, what kind of music do you love? It really depends on my mood. What kind of music or movies do you like to watch? Well, maybe it depends on my mood again, right? Where do you like to shop? What restaurants do you go to? It depends on the money. It depends, you know, the money I have, or it depends on who I'm with. Things like that. A lot of things depend on other factors. So one of the most common started, and you guys, there are so many teachers out there. You want to just be inspired by this and that. Take a little bit, you know, look at different teachers' tips and pull them together and find your favorites. These are some of my favorites just in my experience teaching. I talk about opinion. I like to say from my perspective. Certainty is another starter. Instead of the yes or no, we can just say absolutely, definitely, for sure, without a doubt. If we're really sure of something, again, for the most part, more often than not, it's hard to say. For linking phrases, the connecting examples, I'm just giving you a little bit, just a few right now. These are my favorites. You know, everyone has their favorites. These are the ones that I use most often and I'm most comfortable with. So it depends. You got to pick your favorites, but again, find them, practice using them. On the other hand, conversely, comparatively, in or by contrast. I like by contrast, in contrast. They're apples and oranges. You start to get more words, more tools. You can develop your own style, and you're taking the bar, you're raising the bar. And that's what we want to do for sure. With the on the one hand, on the other hand, just so you know, you don't have to do both. You can just say on the one hand, this, and then comparatively, or you can talk about something and just say on the other hand. You don't have to use them both together, because some people are not so sure about that, but this is the case. All right, boys and girls, let's take what we have learned and apply our knowledge. We're looking at some real model questions that have been running from April and are still going on until the end of August. So the first study tip we are going to put into motion is to apply some practical, common vocabulary as well as some synonyms, stronger words for simple words, basically. Question 1. Do you feel that younger people are more familiar with electronic equipment than the elderly? Without a doubt, young people are more tech savvy than senior citizens, as electronics play a more vital role in their lives. I have a bunch of nephews who are all in their teens and have grown up using gizmos on a daily basis, whereas for old people, these devices are strange and even frightening in some ways. Although modern technology is convenient, there are some young people who have become dependent and even addicted to cell phones. This in turn has had a negative impact because these people have traded their physical exercise for entertainment. So for study tip 2, we're going to be throwing in to the mix some idiomatic expressions, the best things that you want to practice if you want to sound like a native English speaker. For the most part, I keep my eye on the task at hand pretty well. That said, alerts from emails, text messages, or Facebook notifications can sometimes break my focus. I suppose I'd be better off just silencing or muting my cell phone when I'm working, or I'll only accomplish things at a snail's pace. Okay, moving right along. So for question 3, we're going to use some starters, and we really have been using them right all along, but we're also going to highlight some linking phrases, throw in a little bit of collocations in the mix as well. So we're adding a bit of everything, and this will be in our model answer. And question 3 is, what do you often do on your days off? It depends entirely on the weather. If it's bright and warm out, then I'm likely to enjoy my day in a park or go down to the water and take in the fresh air and just kick back. On the other hand, if it's miserable, then I'll probably stay inside and play some online RPGs, or perhaps get into some board games with my family members if they're up for it. With our daily exercise, it is of pivotal importance that you are doing them regularly. So keep that in mind. Even a minimum, guys, of 15 minutes a day. Practice putting these tips into play naturally, right? You want to incorporate them into your natural speaking habits. A lot of these words and things you may be very well aware of, but the question is, do you use them naturally? For our topics, you can use our ever-expanding topics list from the channel, or pick any topics you like. The first task at hand is to try to apply any of the vocabulary, practical vocabulary or synonyms that we've covered today. Start to substitute words and put in stronger vocabulary for these everyday words that come up in many topics. The second thing you want to try to accomplish is to be continually learning and practicing collocations and idiomatic expressions. I've tried to put in some really common ones today that again you are most likely to come across, but you really want to be practicing them regularly and always learning more because they're really fun. There's so many of them and they just make you sound, if you're a non-native speaker, they make you sound like a foreigner. We want to kick things off on a high note by just putting in a starter. We never begin any kind of answer with yes or no, and we don't simply just put the words from the question back into the first sentence of our answer. Starters are great, so make sure you have them in there. They will help you just to lead nicely into your first main example. Finally, we want to be tying everything together, making our speech fluent, because we know fluency is one of the 4 evaluation criteria for the IELTS speaking. And to do that, we want to use linking phrases between our points. Wonderful. Thanks so much for sticking it out, and I really hope that you've picked up a tip or two that is going to help you get at least a 7 score on your IELTS examination. If this is something you have your sights set on, I'm quite confident that if you practice putting these study tips into play, you will be able to achieve this. And again, if you feel this video has been advantageous to you in any way, feel free to click the notifications and subscribe. I'm just warming up with these videos. We got lots to cover in terms of speaking and writing, learning how to use language more effectively, and just keeping it simple. Simple tip, open some doors for your life and just have a stronger impact on your audience. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Kevin. We'll see you again soon. Take care.